LakeSmart is good. It's not as great as I would like to see it be. It is the only program that we know of that creates action on the ground, so that's new and different and very important. But since we started running it 5 years ago, we have had significant contributions from individuals all the way along the line. And some of them are here today, but they aren't in this room, but they have contributed ideas and clarifications and worksheets that have made it a much better and more effective program. And a little while ago, after a number of years of working with homeowners, we scratched our heads and said, yeah, you know, the buffer is probably the most important thing. And very few people are expert gardeners. And they say, yes, we'd like to do that. And then they go to their local nursery and they see a beautiful plant with lots of flowers or something that catches their eye. And it is not hardy for the difficult spot of the shorefront, which is getting wind and all kinds of elements beating on it, and probably high traffic area as well. And they don't know how to plant. So they may have to be adding chemicals to keep this plant alive. Yeah. And it's not going to turn out to be satisfactory for them or us. And I mentioned that, and somebody raised his hand and said, you know, I'd be willing to help you on that. His name is Doug Kavanaugh, and he is at the Greater Pushaw Lake Association. He's a nurseryman and knew a great deal more than I would ever know. And he collaborated with me to, in fact, he spent, I don't know how many hours doing research to develop this brochure for you, which is now available, and has a poster which we can print and make available in a larger size if you want it for a meeting, 11 by 17. He not only picked the plants that would be ideal for different layers of the buffer, but he checked to see which ones were available generally at nurseries in Maine. So a lot of the pre-work, remember this morning I was saying all the things that get in the way of somebody starting a project. Is it going to be expensive? How difficult is it? What knowledge do I need to have, etc. A lot of the problem has been taken out of this buffer planting by Doug Kavanaugh. And this is the product, and he's here, and he's going to explain it to you.
The inspiration, this came from Maggie Shannon. She envisioned initially a large, simple, colorful poster that would be an attractive thing that would bring people to plant, an introduction to plants in the border. So some of the native plants are not as pretty maybe as those that are in the horticultural industry, but they are tough. I've tried to select some of the prettiest of them as well as being tough. So first of all, I want these hardy, beautiful plants. I'm going to come back to availability in a minute. Most of these that are selected will tolerate a fair range of different types of soil conditions, as well as a range of sun requirements and moisture requirements. Many of them are rapid growing, and where possible, I would select plants that had rapid growing, spreading root systems to help anchor the shoreline or stream bank or whatever. One of the prime requirements that I felt was important is that they be widely available. You can't, if you don't know anything about plants, and then if you do know something about a plant, you can't find it, none of this has done any good. So most of these have all been run by the catalogs of 7 major plant suppliers in the state of Maine. All of the nurseries here except Fedco are retail nurseries. They're large. They have a broad selection of plants, and within one type of plant they'll have a depth of varieties of selections. So if you couldn't get it in at least 5 of these 7 locations, you're not going to find it here. Mm-hmm. An example of, and this is not to say that these are the only good plants that you can get. These are the best plants that are widely available for people that really don't know much about plants. If you're a gardener, enjoy landscaping around your house, you've been doing this for years, you probably know as much about this as I do, and you can pick your own plants. This isn't directed to you. It's directed to you out there that have black thumbs or nothing ever grows, you know? Anything you put in the ground never thrives. These are hopefully the bomb-proof plants that you can choose. All of these are retail nursery except Petco, which is a mail order business based in Winslow. You can get bare rootstock through there, but if you're getting bare rootstock, you're already a gardener. You know what you're doing. You know, so,
could I ask you a question right there?
Certainly.
Because the soil and water conservation districts offer plants in the spring, okay. And we have thought that that would be a good source for people, except that the sale is before the summer season and some people are snowbirds. But they're offering bare root, right. So we wouldn't recommend that generally, would we? You wouldn't, because a bare root plant is more difficult to grow?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, and even if you order out of mail order catalogs, you're going to be getting your stock bare root, which means you've got a plant with roots, but no soil. Mm-hmm. It's just hanging out there. So what you need to do is to keep that moist until you can get it potted, which hopefully will be just as soon as possible. Mm-hmm. Even if you keep it in your cellar or someplace and keep it watered until you can get it
in outdoor. The ground. Yeah.
Until you can get it into the ground, right? So this is not for the person that doesn't know anything about plants. It's for someone that's used to handling this kind of material. So in all these nurseries and the plants that I've selected, they're available either as containerized stocks, you know, in a pot, or balled and burlapped, the ball of soil around it and burlap, and which are usually larger size trees. The disadvantage of the selection I made is there are some really excellent plants out there that are not here. One of them was a swamp white oak, a plant actually that I was not familiar with, but was highly recommended to me by Gary Fish, who's our state horticulturalist. Beautiful tree. It's got whitish sort of bark, very sturdy. Actually occupies really sort of swampy ground, much like a red oak. But in looking for it, I could find one nursery that had a little whip of a tree for a reasonable price in a can, and that was fine. And the only other one was a 2.5 caliber balled and burlap tree for $300. So that one is not going to fit our requirement for people doing a border, because the first thing you're going to have to do is to dig a hole like this big on the shoreline, you know, much less pay $300 and try to plant the thing. So if it wasn't a readily available plant, it's not here. I'll show you where you can go to find it, though. We're going to get there. But again, not all the plants that are on this poster are the only ones. You know, you've got 4 choices for a tree, for a small tree, for a large shrub, and so on, a ground cover. 4 in each of those categories. One choice I had that was a really hard one was when I chose a striped maple, which is the second line down. This is sort of an underplanted tree. It's an understory tree. I could have easily chosen a gray dogwood or a pagoda dogwood. Either would have fit that bill just as well. But this is a choice that I made. It doesn't mean that these are the only good plants, and so don't mistake that. Another example is you got red chokeberries and black chokeberries. They're both about the same size. One has red fruit, one has black fruit. You know, they're both fairly kempt-looking plants growing about this high. I went with the black because some of the catalogs said that they thought that was a better-looking plant, intended for a landscape for our purposes. take your choice. You know, there isn't necessarily a right or wrong there. Back in the 1990s, I heard Dr. Michael Durr talk to the Maine Nurserymen's Association. He's one of the leading horticulturalists and plant breeders in the country, professor at the University of Georgia. And this is back in the 90s, and he said, one thing we really need are more varieties or selections of winter berries, which are a wet area plant, you know, growing maybe 6 to 8 feet. And they're berry color berries. If you're driving down 95 from, you know, like Pittsfield to Waterville, that area, the right side of the road is covered with winter berries. That you'll see them in with red berries in the fall, and you'll notice that there's a variation in the color of the berries. Since the 1990s, they have really done a great job of developing selections of winter berries, now heavily fruited, much larger fruit, and they're coming in various sizes, anywhere from 3 feet to 10 feet. The same is true of dogwoods. We used to have only one type of a red twig dogwood, which is a beautiful plant in the late winter, early spring, especially against the spring snow. Nice bright red stem color. There used to be only one type. And maybe one short one called a calcii, which is about 3 feet high. But now, God, in looking through just in the state of Maine catalogs, there are at least 8 different varieties. And again, growing anywhere from 3 feet to probably 10 feet. So we have a lot better and wider selection of plants to choose from than we've ever had before. So this is the poster itself. It's pretty self-explanatory. You've looked at it already. You'll see that for each cell, there's a larger picture of the overall plant. There's also an inset picture, which highlights ornamental characteristic of the plant. You'll have sun and shade requirements here, water requirements. You know, half of a drop, full drop is like dry, half a drop is intermediate, and a full drop is like this, is wet. And if they're bird friendly for either nesting or food berries, you got a little bird there. You also have the common name up at the top, and you have the Latin name. If you're looking at plant lists, you're going to want to know that Latin name, because the horticultural industry runs on Latin names, because the Latin names are very specific. The common names are not. For instance, in Maine, often a shrub called a syringa is actually a mock orange, whereas if you're at a nursery, a syringa is going to be only a type of a lilac. So you've got the Latin names. You can Google the common name, and it will give you the Latin name for any plant that you're looking for. And most plant lists will have both names. There are some exceptions to these. One is with the junipers, and one is with the ferns. And you'll notice up the top, right next to juniper, there's a single asterisk and a double asterisk. These are there are 2 different types of native junipers in Maine. One is the communis, and the other is the horizontalis. The communis is the more upright growing, the horizontalis is usually more prostrate. And these are all selected varieties within those plants. But even though they've got a name, they're still a native plant. You know, they're just one that looked a little different than the others growing in the wild. And you can see on the horizontalis, one of these actually came from the Bar Harbor area. The same is true of ferns. There aren't only 2 ferns; those are just 2 examples of ferns. But all of these ferns are ferns that are native to Maine. Some are growing drier versus wetter, and some in sunnier versus shadier positions. But they're all native plants. There are some plants that were excluded from this list, and some people may object to this. Hemlocks were excluded because they're now susceptible to this woolly adelgid, I think is that how you say it?
That's right.
I'm still not familiar with that, or good with that one. which is starting to affect the hemlocks, southern Maine, and spreading north. There are no viburnums on here, which is a huge loss because we have some beautiful native viburnums, but they are now becoming infected with the viburnum leaf beetle, which will skeletonize the leaf and eventually kill the plant, sometimes over several years. They exhibit a variable amount of resistance to this, but they're all somewhat resistant. The most resistant ones, unfortunately, are not the native plants. At some time when I was looking at the various videos and so on, Dr. Lois Stack at the Extension Service in Orono made a telling comment. It says, when we plant, we're determining what the landscape in Maine is going to look like 30 and 50 years from now. So these plants that may be susceptible to diseases aren't there because we want them to be around in 30 or 50 years. If you're particularly drawn to one of these plants, go ahead and use it. You just may have a problem with it down the road, or it may die on you. I don't want to say that you can't ever have these, and there are plenty of them that are worth having. I've got a Korean spice viburnum, which I just love, but you know, at some point I may have to deal with its having injury. Other information in this brochure is on one page. There's a general planting guide, and I say these are general. And I got to tell you, from the years that I was in the landscaping industry, the way you plant now is different. And I was really surprised about this. Some of the things I knew, but we used to put in lots of peat moss, cow manure and stuff to make a nice rich environment, digging way down beneath the plant and so on. You don't do that anymore. You add almost nothing unless it's really, really porous soil. You scoop out a really wide hole that's only as deep as the plant, and then backfill it with the material that you took out of there. So the reasoning behind that is that what they found, especially in heavier clay soils, is if you take a nursery grown plant and you give us all of this like super fluffy stuff to grow in the hole, and the roots start growing out, and they get to that clay. So I can go back in there where it's nice, you know. So they end up growing in a big circle around there and ultimately girdling the tree. So this is research, you know. This is science, but it is different. It's different than what I learned, and which is one of the reasons I really have enjoyed this journey, if you will, of relearning some things like this. There is, at the very bottom of this section down here, almost illegible because it's so small, is a read more about plantings. Those are a couple of other websites you could go to for a lot more information, especially if you're planting a tree. Go to the Arbor Day website because it talks about staking trees, which is something else that has changed a lot from when I was in the business. But I couldn't put all those details on one sheet.
I'm going to warn you, got to wrap up soon.
Okay, we're almost there. This section, this read more page, is probably the most important page in the brochure. In there you will find references to other places where you can learn things. The first of these was Common Shrubs of Central Maine Shorelines, which was an unpublished book that was put together in 2015, and was gifted to LakeSmart by the author. It is available and accessible through the LakeSmart website. Excellent book on each plant that's selected, good story for it, good knowledge, and some of the best pictures that you'll find in the industry.
So, quick question. I just noticed though that it says access via LakeSmart toolkit, which most people don't have access to.
This is
Yes,
the
they
toolkit
do.
or the website?
Oh, I thought.
They should.
Oh, that's on the website now? I thought
No,
it was
it's
a
not on the
Dropbox.
website. They have to be invited by me.
Right, but also
Anyone
this
who-
is just for LakeSmart evaluators, it's not for the general public?
Oh, good question, buddy.
Because I'm thinking if you
It needs to
reprint
be
this, you
put on
might
the
want to put it on the
website.
website.
Are you telling me that it needs to be put on the website? I will write that down.
For when you reprint this?
That's an excellent
No,
point.
we can put it on the website now, and it would be available.
Right, but when you reprint this,
Oh.
you might want to change the toolkit to the URL.
The next
Right.
reference down is the buffer handbook plant list, which was revised, I think, in 2009 or 11 with Lois Berg-Stack. This is the number one go-to reference for any plants here, native or non-native. These are Maine plants that can be used in buffers. Not only are they woody plants, it also includes grasses and perennials, of which there are none on our list here. Down below that, in a very little tiny print, are the photo credits. If you want to see what your plants are going to look like, if you want more information about them, I mostly recommend going to the University of Connecticut Plant Database. Google that and it will put you in there excellent pictures of what your plants are going to be. So, in closing, I would like to give thanks to Dale Finseth, the Kennebec County Soil and Water Conservation District, one of the people with whom I consulted. Gary Fish, who's the state horticulturalist for the state of Maine, also a fish photographer. He supplied the pictures for the bunchberry, the Cercis canadensis. Those are the best pictures you can find in the United States. I looked for a while. Now, also, we have to thank Maggie Shannon, instigator.
Thank you.
Instigator, idea person, and who inspires us all and works harder than most of us. And lastly, Carol Craig of All Souls Church, who is our administrative assistant there, who was responsible for all things computer that made this happen.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So Survey 123 is a mobile app for your phone or tablet or computer. So you can fill in surveys while you're at the site, or you can do paper surveys, take them home and fill them in on your computer. So it's pretty flexible. You can work however you're most comfortable working. You don't need a cellular connection or a Wi-Fi signal while you're at the house. You do need it to download the app in the first place and to upload the evaluations when you're done with them, but you don't need it out in the field. Everything is saved on the phone or your tablet.
When you start.
And the really nice thing is that the data gets uploaded immediately to a database that lives in the cloud, and so we can access it at any time and get almost real-time information on the results of the surveys. One thing I should mention, if anyone already has the app and is using it, there were a couple of errors that were caught in the tabulations of the numbers. So there is an update. We're now on version 1.2, and anyone who has 1.1, you'll need to update that before doing an evaluation. And I'll be demonstrating that, and it's also in the instructions. I meant to mention that because that's pretty important. Okay, so it's a two-part process to getting this app. The first is to install the free Survey 123 app, which I did not develop. That's a third-party thing developed by the company Esri. That goes on your phone, and that's available through a search on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, depending on your device. Or so you'd search for that term, Survey 123 for ArcGIS, and then install the app as you normally install anything else. If you open the app immediately after you're installing it, before doing anything else, it'll ask you to sign in to get new surveys. You don't need to sign in. It's an anonymous or public survey, so it's not tracking who is actually submitting, other than when you type in your name as being the evaluator. So you don't need to sign in if you ever see that.
I have a question, because this kind of thing drives me crazy. In both cases, it says to sign in, you don't have to sign in, but then what happens? How do you get to the next screen?
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
Next step. Yeah.
okay.
Okay. So the next step, this is the part 2, is loading the survey.
Well, no, his
Oh.
question is, you're on the screen where it says
Oh,
sign in.
yeah.
What do you do?
So you can just go to the home screen on your phone. So just press the home button or close the app. Because then you're going to the next step, which is installing the actual survey. But before I do that, you can also, as I said, install the app on a home computer or laptop. And to do that, you can go to this link, or I find it's almost easier to do a Google search for Get Survey 123. And it will take you to a web page. It's a little hard to see. There are 3 columns. You want to get your download from the middle column, which is the Survey 123 Field app. Ignore the other 2. And you want to choose your correct operating system, Windows, Mac, Linux, or Android, from the last 4 items in the list. The top 3 are for mobile devices, and I'm not sure why they put the links in there if you're on a computer, but ignore them. Again, after you've installed, no need to sign in. Okay, now we're going to step 2. For the current year, there are 3 ways to access the survey, and these are all in the instruction sheet. One, I find the most easy, if your phone has the capability. Turn on the camera on your phone and point it at the QR code. It's printed in the instructions. Don't press focus, don't do anything, just point it, let it focus on its own. And if your phone has a built-in QR reader, it will pop up with a little window that says, do you want to go to ArcGIS, blah, blah, blah. So you would click that link and it would take you to the web page where you get the survey. If for some reason that doesn't work, I think iPhone 6 and up it works on, and more recent Androids, Samsungs.
Would this work on a 5-year-old iPad,
I don't know.
just as a camera? Probably not.
Possibly not, yeah.
If it doesn't work right away, it's
Yeah.
generally, you can say it isn't working. Some people with older phones have not had success with this. For people with newer phones or new tablets, this has been extremely successful, but if it's just not working, probably your device is too old.
So if that doesn't work, the second step, you may have been sent an email by Maggie with a link to the survey, and you can click the link in that email if you're on your phone, and that web page will open up. And I'm going to show you what the web page looks like on the next slide. And then the third way is to actually open a browser, so Safari, Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and type in the link arcg.is/qbniz. And you can even bookmark that. I have it bookmarked on my computer and on devices because you're going to go back to that potentially to get updates. And
Well, could I just say, as a person for whom this all is challenging, that 2 and 3 are really the same. It is that same link, whatever source you get it from. It is arcg.is/qbniz. That's all you really have to remember. If your camera doesn't work, you take your browser and go there, or it's the same thing.
Can one use a Dell computer or a PC?
Yeah.
Okay, one doesn't have to use an Apple product.
no,
Good.
If you downloaded this last year.
there's a new version.
Should we go through this now if we re-download?
Yeah, because there's a new version, a whole new, because there were a lot of changes to the survey setup, so it's a new thing, and it has the year on it,
Okay.
2019. Yeah. Oh, and one thing about if you're entering that URL in a browser, if you're using Google, you see the Google name and then the search bar. Don't enter it there. You can't search for the term. You have to go to the very top of the screen. There's a gray navigation bar, and that's where you type in the URL. So once you've successfully got to that link, this is what you'll see. Open in the Survey 123 field app. Hit yes, I do. You may need to click open again. It might look a little bit different on different devices, but in general, once you've got to the screen, you know you're in the right place. Now, it's possible that you may have a pop-up blocker on a browser, like Chrome has pop-up blockers, and they'll prevent that second little pop-up from opening up. So if you hit it and survey never opens, check for pop-up blockers, turn them off. Another possibility is you think you have the Survey 123 app on there, but you may not. So if you don't have the app already installed, you can't install the CBI, sorry, wrong program, LakeSmart survey on top of it.
Yeah, keep in mind, it's a two-step process.
Yeah.
You have to get the app, step one, and then you get the survey. And you're dropping survey into the app. So that's why you have to have your app first and then your survey.
So 3 things to check. Do you have the Survey 123 app? Do you have pop-ups blocked? And if that fails, then try a different browser. Okay. So now everything's installed. You've got Survey 123. You've got the LakeSmart survey. You will see the icon. This screen has the LakeSmart 2018 and the 2019 icons on it. So if you have 2018, you may want to just delete it off the phone altogether to avoid confusion. And this is when you, yes. So the middle screen shows the created date and the last modified date. And this is where I was saying the latest version is 1.2, so I just updated that yesterday. So you want to make sure that it's got a fairly recent last modified date and that it's on version 2019, 1.2, or whatever you've gotten. If you've gotten a notification, just make sure the notification matches your version. So you hit collect to start collecting. And Roy is going to run through actually doing a survey on a tablet, so I'm not going to go too much into the process, but just a few notes about it. Like I said, sometimes there need to be updates done to the survey, and you should be notified about that by your coordinator or Maggie. And the important thing about this is when you get the notification to update, you need to delete the existing version. So you can't just download another copy and expect it to overwrite what's on there. You have to, let's see, make sure you've completed any surveys that are in process, submit any drafts, finish and submit any drafts, because they'll get deleted when the survey gets deleted. So you want to be sure that everything is squared away before going through this process. And if you do need confirmation that your survey has been submitted, just let me know or let Barbara know, and we'll go into the database and verify that it's there before doing that. So to delete the current version, you open the app. I'll go back a screen. You open the app, you're going to be opening the survey. So when you're on this screen, you go into this menu up in the top right, 3 horizontal bars. Click that, and the only option there will be delete survey. So you hit that, and then yes to confirm. That will get rid of it. And then you can go back to that same ArcGIS/QBNiz URL. Okay. Types of questions. Some questions are required. They have a red asterisk next to them. You'll get a warning if you try to submit without those questions answered properly. There are a bunch of different types of questions, drop down, multiple choice. With multiple choice lists, you can actually start typing in the name of the lake organization, and it will narrow down the list, and you can select. Be sure you hit the radio button that's next to the your choice, because otherwise it won't register, and you'll have to go back and do it. There's short fill-in answers, long fill-in comments and notes. If you want to make comments, but you don't want to sit there and type all day, your phone or whatever will often have, when you open up the keyboard, there'll be a little microphone symbol down next to the space bar, usually. If you hit that, that's a voice recognition feature. And I think someone told me recently that you have to be online for that to work. I'm not sure. I haven't tested that. But you can try it out, so it's a good way. It's like a voice memo, but it transcribes. it may not transcribe accurately, it may be gibberish, so you'll want to look at the comment and make any edits before you submit it, but that's a handy feature. Okay. If you need to save a survey to complete later, you click the X at the top left of the screen. You'll have the option to close the survey and lose your changes, so that wipes out anything you've done. You usually don't want to do that. To continue the survey, which just picks up where you left off, or to save the survey in drafts. So select that option, and then you'll have a new draft option on the home screen for the survey, and you can go into that, and it's identifying the surveys by your name, property owner name, and the evaluation date. So you can just go tap that to go back into it and continue working. Those of you who used it last year, it was just one giant list and you had drop-down arrows and the sections expanded down. Now there are pages, which I think cleans it up a lot. So pages 1 is like the basic information about your name and organization. Second page is site information. And then the sections begin pages 3 and on. So you just navigate through those by the arrows on the bottom of the screen. And you can move through it. You can skip questions and come back. So that's not an issue. Site location map. If you have the GPS turned on your device for this app, you can just tap the little target. If you're on the site, tap the target and it should put a pin where you are. But then if you're doing the data entry at home, say you can actually enter the site address in the search bar and it will reposition the map to where the site is, or close. It may not be accurate, so you may need to manually adjust it.
Can I just interject there? To get to this second page for site location for the map, you just click anywhere on the map and it'll pop open. So if you're on your device and you're not hitting the target because you're not at the site at that moment, you're back at home, click anywhere on that map, the second page will open up. The key thing about this is it's a little tricky, and I learned this the other day. So you're going to enter your address here. And typically, so I'm going to say it's 19 Spring Lane, and it's Rome, Maine. It's what's interesting about Rome, Maine, just a little sidebar, is that Rome, Maine uses an Oakland zip code. So Rome, it doesn't say 19 Spring Lane, Rome, it says 19 Spring Lane, Oakland, because it's the Oakland zip number. But that, you'll see a whole series of 19 Spring Lanes. You know, one's in New York, one's in whatever. But there's mine. Double click on your address. Single click will move your pin to the right place, but it won't stick. Double click. Your pin goes to where it is, and then come down here and hit the check. But the secret is that, is it a single click on that or a double click? I found double click on your address. Click, click, come down here and check. A single click and a check. You say, it's there, and you go back to your screen, and it looks like I'm sitting back in my house. So double click the address, hit the check. You should be golden.
All right. So.
It can be annoying when it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, that's good.
We don't want to annoy you.
And everyone's been in this situation. What happens if your phone dies while you're in the middle of it? The app has an auto-save function, so after you enter a field, it should save everything that's been entered previously. Once you plugged your phone back in and recharged it, turned it back on, if you go back into the app, you should have a notification that survey has been recovered. Do you want to discard it or continue it? So keep our fingers crossed that that continues to work.
And you will have a paper form with you
Yes.
in your car always, because your phone can die anytime, so always have that backup.
All right, so you've successfully finished the survey. All your questions are filled in. Don't hit the X mark. That closes the survey or saves it. You want to hit the check mark down in the bottom right. If you hit that and something's wrong, it'll pop up a notification saying you didn't answer this question. And usually the notification is pretty specific about what has been left out. So you should be able to find it pretty easily.
Becky, when you submit, can you send copies of that submit at the same time, or do you have to? find some way to send a copy to somebody else.
It just submits it once to the cloud and it saves on the phone, but if you want copies, you need to get the login information, which we'll be talking about later. And this is just what happens if information's incomplete. If there's no internet access when you try to submit it, the survey is saved to an outbox, and you'll be notified there's no connection. So when you go home, when you have cell connection again, be sure you look on the home screen and see if the outbox has any pending submissions in it. It'll be like a red number next to the outbox. And you just hit the outbox and send now. Send now. Okay. Always email your coordinator to let them know when you've submitted a survey, just so we can be aware that it should be in there. If for whatever reason it hasn't been submitted, we can track that down. Pictures can be sent as an attachment to that email. There's room to submit pictures with the survey. You can directly attach them to the survey when you're doing it. Roy might be doing that. And it goes to the central database. Last slide, I think. You can make minor corrections to submitted surveys if they're still on your phone, if you haven't gone through an update process. You go into the sent box, choose the right survey that you want to correct, open it up, and you want to be careful when you're doing this because if you edit and resend the survey, the first option, it's going to overwrite what's in there already. If you choose the second one, copy the sent data to a new survey, you'll end up with duplicate copies of your data.
So what is the choice that they choose? They choose
Generally, edit and resend.
and resend.
If it was like a revisit of a site that you had been to before, you may have a lot of the same information. So that might be one situation where you'd want to copy and resend because you can change some of the fields but have a lot of the same information, so you don't have to go through all again. Okay, so now we're going to get Roy set up to do, right? Are we doing?
Yeah.
Yes, no.
Normally, if I were just starting a survey, I'd be hitting collect here. But since I've partially completed a survey because there's limited time, I've already got one in draft that we're going to be talking about. And I've conveniently labeled it with my own name. And a lot of this represents my own property. All of this is pretty intuitive. Property owner, I mean, a lot of this information I actually collect from the property owner before I ever show up to walk the property. I have a form that, if any of you want, email me, I'll send you a copy, which basically I have the property owner give me all the information I need in advance so I don't have to do it when I'm at the property.
Excuse me, Roy, is that the self-survey?
Huh?
Is that the homeowner self-survey that you
No,
developed?
I have my own form that I did, that just takes the stuff I want, that this asks for, that they can provide in advance.
Okay.
And then I typically load that at home, which is where I usually ran into my first mistake, which is I would have loaded everything at home, and of course I wouldn't have loaded the map, and I didn't realize last year that there was any other way to deal with this but to be at the property and press the button to put the pin in the right map. So I can't tell you how many times I had to revisit the property after walking it because I didn't know about the ability to put in an address. That's so easy, and thank you very much. In this case, I was going to show you how, but you already have. I've got Carol Ayer's property in the address book, and that's what's reflected on this.
Why don't you go through that real quick, because that is a trick.
Okay. Well,
You did.
here's the, if I just press that, now we're in Farmington. Okay? So I'm hitting the map, looking at so now I'm going to go, all right, I'll go to my property, 85 Woods Pond Drive. And there we are. I hit that, and I hit it twice because I've been told to hit it twice, and that's where my property is located. Okay, so I'm on to the next page.
Did you do it?
Yeah, I did. Isn't that,
And hit the check mark. Make sure you hit the check mark down below.
well, this one, I don't know, it's still showing 17 Molly Morgan Way, but, well, that's because that's a different item. We're going to ignore that. You're entering all of the intake information, year built, number of years owned, whatever. And then, oh, let me get out my notes. What I want to do is identify the things that have changed on the form since last year. Questions 11 and 12 are new. We're asking, and neither one of these questions has anything to do with scoring on the LakeSmart evaluation. It is a teachable moment. Question 11 says, do you remove any aquatic plants from the lake near your shorefront? Because that's a time for you to inform the homeowner that that's not a good thing to do. Hopefully he's going to say no. 12 is, do you remove any woody structure, rocks, leaves, or other natural materials from the lake near your shorefront that do not pose a hazard to safety or navigation? Once again, teachable moment. We don't want them doing that. We want them to know that that's not a good thing for the lake. Hopefully they're saying no. Whatever the answers are to those two questions, they actually don't affect the scoring, but it is a teachable moment.
Where are these questions you're talking about?
They are in the introductory
Here.
portion
Okay,
of the...
okay, got it.
Okay, now we're on to, well, there were no particular changes in section 1, so we're on to section 2, structures and septic system. Question 2E is new. Is vegetation downhill from the leach field noticeably greener and more lush than any other plantings? Of course, if it is, that's a suggestion that perhaps you have a problem with the septic system. So that's an important information. It needs to be noticeably greener, so I'm assuming it needs to be reasonably obvious, but that's something that wasn't there last year. We're going to say no in this evaluation. Now I'm on to section 3, the yard. What's new here is question 3K. 3K says, oh, is flowing water buffered by vegetation? What we're getting at here is that properties have either a running stream or intermittent streams or a culvert that runs through their property. There's running, and the point is, at some point there's running water on that property. And if there is, we want to know whether there's a buffer. And is it a minimum of a 10-foot buffer? And that's what 3K addresses.
Roy,
Yes.
doing an evaluation last Thursday, the person I was with had a really hard time separating this question from the questions on the buffers. He just didn't quite get that this was talking about flowing water and buffer along the flowing.
That's right. This deals with a stream, even if it's just intermittent when there's a heavy rain or whatever.
Right, it really hung her up. And the other question, which was a good point, is should we not have a not applicable answer to this? If there is no stream, no culvert, no...
Well, some of these questions really don't have application to property, and if they don't, then there's no loss of points. So you basically answer it as if they get maximum points. So if there is no stream, for example, in this question, we would give them, it would say minimum 10-foot buffer. We'd give them maximum points.
Okay.
Okay? So even though it's not stated as not applicable, if it is not applicable, they don't lose points.
It's
Okay.
just like the mowing of lawn. I have no lawn.
Right.
So you still say, yes, they mow, you know. You give them a full credit.
That's right. So if a question doesn't apply, that means no lost points, maximum points. Let's see, now I'm on to the next section, the buffer and water access. Question 4C. There are two parts to 4C. Previously, there was one part. The part that has always existed is what's the depth of the buffer. It starts at minimum of 10 feet and goes up to over 50 feet. That remains the same. But now we're asking a second part to that question. Is there an ice berm or a negative slope, something that is going to protect the lake from a flow of water into it? And if there is, then the question becomes, is it vegetated? Is that area vegetated or not? The key to this particular question is if there's an ice berm or a negative slope, does it completely protect the lake? That is, for example, an ice berm, but there's a break in it at some point, and so it doesn't actually protect the lake in the way we would want, because water will flow along the berm and then into the lake. In that case, you treat it as if it weren't there at all. But if there is an ice berm and it's vegetated, for example, if they've lost any points because the depth in the first 4C was not completely adequate, they're going to gain a point or two under the second part of the 4C question if there is an ice berm that's otherwise protecting the lake, or a negative slope. You know, understand what I mean by a negative slope? That is, the slope at the height at the edge of the lake is higher than the lawn below it.
But I had a great property for all of these conditions.
Yeah.
The other day, it did have like an ice berm, it did have a negative slope. My question is, if you've got that and it carries over into the neighbor's property before it would empty out into the lake, it's off of their property. You know, because, well,
I'm not sure the answer to that question. We're going to make some policy here right now.
We're not going to take points off with that, Doug.
Okay.
But we're going to advise them that he's dumping on his neighbor. He might, in fact, we just did that at 3 Mile Pond the other day. We had a perfect LakeSmart property that was canted to the right. And, yeah, so that was sort of a neighbor-to-neighbor issue.
Yeah.
But he doesn't get docked on his own evaluation.
I've actually had a situation like that where the reason that the homeowner whose property I was evaluating hasn't corrected a situation was because of neighborly relations, because everything backed up onto the neighbor's property. And I don't know quite how to deal with that, other than this property loses points because of it. But I understand why you wouldn't correct it, because you got a problem with your neighbor, and they don't want the flooding. So at some point, we can't solve all problems. Yes?
Does that ice berm override the requirement of a 10-foot buffer zone? It must
A
be
little
at least
bit.
10 foot.
It still needs, as I understand it, it still needs to be a minimum of 10 feet in order to
Even
pass
though it's
the
got the
test.
ice berm that's...
Yeah, and I'm not sure that in the scoring that it actually works that way.
No.
Well,
No,
okay, this may be an
science.
issue then.
Maybe
Well-
yeah.
Well, here's the issue it raises. Suppose you've got a great ice berm, no vegetation. I can guarantee that when you go to the end of the dock and you take pictures of the buffer, that if you recommend an award, the reviewer is going to deny that award, because they're going to look at that and say it doesn't look LakeSmart. Guaranteed. So whether the scoring does it in this or not, the reviewer isn't going to give it an award.
Okay.
Yeah,
And I think-
until yesterday, it still failed if it was less than 10.
Right.
But then Barbara and I talked, and I guess we need to discuss this, because we changed it so that if the extra points were awarded, then it would
Right.
pass, even if it was less than 10.
And I think,
which-
like I say, even if it does pass under this scoring, the reviewer's going to say, And that's the way it should be, because we want anything that's carrying an award sign, we want it to project what we're proud of, and we're not proud of a lakeshore that doesn't have vegetation on it.
So the property I was looking at, again, the same one yesterday, it had a negative slope that was covered with grass and sedges. And they mowed it down to, 15, 20 feet back from the water.
Right,
I think that was sort of the natural vegetation that was there.
yeah,
It was in a protected cove, so it wasn't getting wave
Right.
washes on it. And I'm glad I got a chance to talk to you
Right.
about this, because I wasn't sure quite what to do with it. It's 30 feet wide on each side of it. It's marsh area there. It's got plants, copiously out into the marsh and all that marsh.
The ultimate question really is, does it look LakeSmart?
Looks like it's mown.
Well, if it doesn't look LakeSmart, then it shouldn't be getting a LakeSmart sign, because the sign is telling all of the neighbors what LakeSmart is, and if it's saying the wrong thing, we don't want it carrying a sign. This, by the way, I was recommending awards last year before I understood this standard, and my reviewer was saying, no, no, no. So, and I accept that that's the appropriate judgment.
Yeah, we went around a lot about that this winter.
Okay, something else that's new is for F, has channeled or concentrated runoff into the buffer been corrected? I think what we're talking about here is, by definition, it's running into a buffer, but we want to know how quickly it's being corrected. We want concentrated runoff dispersed as quickly as possible. So if it's one thing for a whole culvert to be dumping like crazy into a buffer, if that's can't be avoided, okay, but then the question is, what's happening to it? Is it being dispersed in the quickest possible manner? So some judgment has to be made there in 4F. Oops, and then what's going on here? Well, then the rest of it is you're making comments along the way if there are comments to be made. There are BMPs that you can remind yourself about along the way in terms of things that you want to recommend to the property owner. And after you've done all the scoring, you're going to get a preliminary judgment based on the scoring in each section as to whether there's a pass or not. Remembering, of course, none of this is ever absolute. Any recommended award has to be confirmed by a reviewer. So the way I always express it to a property owner is if I'm feeling pretty confident, I will say, I am going to recommend an award, but it needs to be reviewed and it may not pass that review. I want them to understand that that's the case. And I'm very happy I've said it that way, because there are a couple of times where I was pretty damn confident it would pass and it didn't. After you've done the scoring, now, at this point, I usually go and do this separately. You have to take some pictures. You go walk to the end. First thing you do, you walk to the end of the dock, you look back at the shoreline, you hit the little camera button, and then it takes a while for my thing to reorient. You look to the left, you take a picture of the shoreline. Now you do the same by looking to the right from the end of the dock at the shoreline. Then you walk back onto the shore, and now is a chance to take a couple of pictures in the buffer. And since we went left first and then right, I do the same thing as a standard practice, even though it doesn't say so. I look to the left, get a nice view of the buffer, because the reviewer wants to see this stuff. You take your picture. Same thing to the right. You take your picture. Now, oh, I thought I did that already. All right. Well,
Roy, could I say one quick thing about the buffer?
Yeah.
I want to be able to see the distribution of plants in the buffer. So it's a good idea to place yourself midway
right.
back from the lake to the, within the width of the buffer and look through it, so that we can have a sense of what is the distribution. How thick is it? Because we want to see a sturdy stand of mixed vegetation there. And if your picture is like from one side or the other, pretty hard at 200 miles away to tell about the distribution.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about this as I'm trying my best to communicate to the reviewer what it is I'm seeing, and I want a representative photo. And that's the best you can do. But you want the reviewer to actually have a chance to tell you you're making a mistake if the possibility exists. then you do have the possibility of additional photos. At this point, do you want to submit additional photos? You check yes, and up pops the possibility of more photos. At this point, if there are peculiar aspects to the property, you go and take pictures of them, and you describe below that what you're looking at so that the reviewer has an idea of what the picture represents. Like there's a structure within the 100-foot zone, it's not grandfathered, it should automatically disqualify the property for an award, but you don't think that's fair, and you want to talk about that with the reviewer. We'll take a picture of it. They'll give you a chance to explain to the reviewer why you don't think that's fair, and after that discussion, the reviewer will decide whether or not the property is award-worthy. After you've taken your pictures, now you're going to enter the mileage that you traveled, the time you spent in the travel, the time you spent doing the evaluation, the time you spent writing up the report to the property owner. And then it will, if you press the button then it'll total all of the time up for you. Here's a word of advice from me. I find that before I file any of this evaluation, I write up my report because I lose control of the information in the report after I file it. So I write my report, I'll go home, I'll write it. Once I'm ready to submit, once I'm ready with a draft for the property owner, at that point, I will file my report. It's asking what now, do I send it? Do I continue this survey or do I send later? In the normal case, if I've written my report, I'd say send now. I'm not going to do this because then it would enter into the database and this isn't the real property. So I'm not going to do that now. But if I had prepared my report, I'd hit send now, and that would be the end of it, other than send an email to the reviewer and to Maggie and the reviewer. In the case I'm in the LEA hub, so I have a reviewer there that I deal with. I also have Maggie. I send them both an email message saying, hey, I just filed the report for the Lambert property. Would you please let me know what you think when you get a chance? And it's done. And then depending on what comments I get back from the reviewer or from Maggie or both, I may or may not modify the draft report I have for the property owner. And at that point, I email it to them, and I will probably go and hand deliver it to them. It gives me another chance to walk the property with them and show them what it is that I saw. By the way, I did that process at the time that I walked the property. After I walk the property, I come back to the property owner, we walk the property again, I point out my preliminary observations, but then I finalize it with the report. So that's it for me. Thank you.
That's really great. So you go twice with the homeowner over the property.
That's right.
And the second time when you do, you're taking a thank you letter with your recommendations.
Yeah.
And any of the MP sheets that you're going to be giving.
Well, and when I send it to them by email, I attach to that, I also attach to that BMP sheets, anything that will help them follow through with the suggestions that we make. I'm trying to make this as easy as possible for the property owner, and I've got a wealth of information that they don't. I try and give them what I think is relevant to them to help them do what we want them to do.
Yeah, that's great, Greg. Thank you.
Okay?
I've given you a handout which includes what I'm going to do, and then Becky's going to actually physically walk you through it. So this is our database, and to get access to the database, you have to receive a password, a username and a password from Maine Lake Society. So you will be contacting Maine Lake Society to get more information. And again, Becky is always available for assistance as well if you need assistance. There are multiple levels of access to this LakeSmart database. The top level is the administrator, and the administrator is Maggie and Becky. They created the survey, they can manage the data, they can review all the certification. Maggie will be able to do her final evaluation there. She can save all the records to PDF files. She can export and create Excel database for the Maine Lakes records. The second level is Lake_Smart, and that's what people had access to last year. But that person sees all surveys and can save all surveys. They can also review for certification if needed. They can save all PDFs to a master file. They can export to an Excel spreadsheet. And they have the ability to put in a coordinator's comment. Now, the hubs, there are hubs out there. LEA is a hub. Seven Lakes is a hub. 30 Mile is a hub. And they are an umbrella organization. So, for example, Seven Lakes, there's East Pond, North Pond, McGraw and Salmon, there's Great, there's North, there's Long, there's Mesolonsky. They all fall under the hub. And a hub, when they have their own access, they will see only that there's the ability for a hub to have access through their own Survey 123 account, and they're given access to this data, but it will be restricted to their umbrella. So we're trying to, for security reasons, limit the data that everybody can see, sort of like HIPAA. I work for the hospital, it's like HIPAA, right? You don't want to see things that are not yours. And then the lowest level is a viewer. Now a viewer means that you can see the data, you can save your files, but you can't edit. And you can't export the data to a spreadsheet. And that's what all coordinators will be given. They're in the process of assigning usernames and passwords. And Maggie, in the next week, will be getting, sometime in the next week or so, will be getting to all the coordinators to give them their username and their password.
Barbara,
Yes,
could you go back to the slide you were just on?
yes,
Now, the administrator is restricted to the DEP and the Maine Lakes Society.
correct.
And who uses the publisher, and what does it cost? Is that of any interest to anybody in this room?
Yes, this slide is going to help us with that. If you are a viewer,
That would be someone like Sherry Pettyjohn, who is a coordinator for a single lake.
yes, for a single lake.
Or Marie.
Right. And if they do not have their own organization's accounts, so they are going into the LakeSmart program as a general viewer, and they will see some or all, depending upon how we break up the usernames, and they have no editing and no export power.
Yes, but they don't pay anything. They
Yes.
get that for free.
They get that for free.
And if they wanted more, they would have to pay a fee.
Yes.
Okay.
If your organization wants to have your own personal ARC account, and you want viewer access only, it's a $50. Am I correct?
No, they don't pay that, I pay that.
If they wanted to have
If
editing,
they're a
it would be
viewer.
$100.
If they want editing, it's $100.
That is correct. This is what they need to know.
Yes. So there's a view-only level of 50, and there's a editing level of 100.
Okay,
So,
does everybody understand that? You don't have to do anything, you're a coordinator, you don't have to do anything unusual. I will communicate with you, Becky and I will this next week, be assigning you a password, and you will be able to use the online database as you have, and you will be able to see, say, a group of 15 organizations. We're limiting that so that it is not all that confusing.
That's right.
And there is no cost to you. However, if you wanted to be able to manipulate your data by exporting it and putting it in Excel, that's an expense that the Maine Lakes Society cannot sustain. And we would therefore ask you, correct me if I'm wrong, Becky, to pay $100 and work with Esri, the company that runs ArcGIS, and get your own license, and then you would be able to edit and export.
Correct.
Is that clear to everybody? And am I correct? That's what I think they need to know.
Yes, Marie?
So last year, I was able to go in and check all the data. I could put in that I reviewed it, and then I could export it, and I could save that for my records, so that in future years, if that homeowner, if I need to retrieve that data, I have it available.
Yep.
So this year, I have to pay for that.
No.
Okay, thank you.
So we have 3 levels. We've talked about administrative, that's restricted. We have the person who can view only, and you can save a copy of your files. So view only does allow you to save your records, but not in an Excel spreadsheet.
It
You're
is as the format.
you're saving each survey document. Okay?
Okay.
The ability to edit means you get in and you can add your coordinator comments, which you did last year.
Yeah.
And you could download that to us in an Excel spreadsheet. But that's the editing. So there's the difference in layers between a viewer and a person who can edit. Okay? Now, one of the things we're going to ask, when we give you a password, we are going to ask you to sign a security pledge. Upon completion of the coordinator app training, you will manage the data in a secure manner. All users pledge not to copy, save, sell, or use data in an improper manner. All users pledge not to edit any data belonging to another organization. Sort of common sense things here. Security passwords may not be shared with anyone not trained and has not signed a security document. We've done this because there were major concerns from some organizations about, we don't want to use this at all because my homeowners' names and addresses and emails are all in this database, and we don't want the world getting this information. They don't want the world getting this information. We pledge that ourselves. We will not use this data in any way. We will not sell the data to another organization, for example. So that's a key security issue that we've tried to address. Now, once you are given access, you do need to put onto your computer, in your browser, you want to go to the Survey123 ArcGIS.com site, and you can save this to you can bookmark it. So you go into there, and we're going to sign in. And this is where I'm going to turn over the PowerPoint, of which you have a copy, to Becky. So she is going to drive and show you. She's going to log in. Do you want to log in as LakeSmart, or do you want to
I'll
log
log
in
in
as
as LakeSmart.
You can close that right down if you want.
Marie, did you get your question answered?
Yes, thank you.
Today, what we're going to cover is we're just going to cover sort of the viewer information. Depending upon the time, and we're kind of running quick on time because we do want a chance for questions. The part of who can get in and edit and how to edit and so forth, we thought we would do at a later point in time, specifically for those individuals who want to go that route. And we thought we would do either a go-to-meeting or something to try to get that information.
Barbara,
Yes,
if I'm a viewer
Yes.
Can I go in and see those in my lake that are LakeSmart and also those that have been run a LakeSmart evaluation but did not become LakeSmart?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you're going to get, you'll fix, ultimately, after Maggie does her final review, or MLS does their final review, then you will see the final interpretation as award or as commendation.
Okay.
And awards are certified, so you have a certified yes and a certified date. Commendation is no certification, it's just commendation. Those are the two results you'll see.
Great.
There's 2 coordinators for China Lake as of this year, so could we both have a meeting capacity over this year?
If you want to pay for your own,
You can only have 1 coordinator.
yes, because remember, the generic usernames that Maggie is going to give you
Yes.
are going to be not assigned to each individual person, because those would be $50 each.
Okay.
And so we chose, Maggie and MLS chose to purchase 5 of those and sort of distribute it around to multiple groups. And I'm going to show you. So this is where she is. And on her computer, it says sign in here. On my computer, my button is up in the corner, but we're going to sign in. Again, different computers, different computer systems sometimes have a slightly different look to them. The picture you have in here is the picture that I see on my screen when I log in. And you'll notice in the far right corner, I get the sign-in screen, and I get the same type of window. Now, when you sign in, you're going to see that our LakeSmart database has 2 years of data in there. We have the 2018 and we have the 2019. If when you log in, it does not take you right to the screen. See this button up here, it says My Surveys? Just click on that My Surveys and you'll come to this page. Now, you want to see the data, so you want to see this little box that she's just highlighted on? That says data. You'll notice there are 17 records so far this year. So when she logs in, we're going to see 2 things. We're going to see a map. Notice it sort of shows the map of the world, but it is now focused, and it's going to show us a map of Maine. And we do not have object ID. So I did not point this out in this, because the other day I ran my program and I had object ID on already. See what she did here? I'm going to bear with me here. She came over to this little plus button and she highlighted object ID. Turn that on. That is good information.
What
That
it is,
is the identifier for that particular record for this year. And that connects to the name of the homeowner, and that's why it's important.
Right here. So when you as a coordinator log in, you can do a couple of things. But first thing you want to do is turn that object ID on. The second thing that we're going to do is we are going to, Marie, may I use your location, please, as a...
Sure.
We're going to do a filter. And we are going to, so again, we have a map and we have each line of the documents. Oh, before I get there, sorry, can you click on object ID, please? And you notice ascending and descending. Ascending is going to start with the first one from this year. If we sort by descending, you're going to get the latest of the year. So Maggie, typically, I recommended to her, click on your descending because those are the newest ones. Okay, now we're going to go to filter. We go up to the filter, and you'll notice it comes to property name. These are the evaluation information, and if you hit the little down caret, you're going to go down. And we're recommending for coordinators to go down to their umbrella organization or their lake organization, whichever. For example, let's do lake organization. And is always what you want, is. So leave that alone. Value, now if you click value, you have to type.
I guess it depends, but let's do unique, right?
Let's do unique. So
Okay.
we've got unique. Okay, so we're going to choose China Lake Association, because that's Marie's group. Now when she chooses that, now we're going to apply and zoom. Look at our map. See all those dots? Hit apply and zoom. Now I have one dot. That's Marie's property that she had. If she had 3 or 4 properties already done, you would see 3 or 4 properties. You can just hit the X to close this down. And you know, so she has this document. Now, she's going to click on this. Right now, Marie only has 1. If she had 4 or 5, she would scroll down to see all of her, but she's only seeing her own. So filtering is the first thing you want to do to bring that huge list, because when it's 100 and 200 properties in there, you'll want to bring it down to your 10, 20, 50, however many you have. Okay, so we're going to click on that. And when we click on that, over to the right is the survey. And we can scroll down in that survey. We can see the map. And so there's the property. And you notice she can click, click, click to bring it in. Okay, so that's a good way of doing that if you want to check your location. And just keep scrolling down. And you can, if you were done looking at, well, let's keep going. Let's scroll all the way down to pictures. How do we, let's do that. When we get down to pictures, so you would have been reviewing, you might, as a coordinator, be reviewing all these points. You looked at when was the septic pump last, you looked at how the questions were answered, you would see what the buffer looked like. And now we're down to pictures. If you click on the picture, it opens up. Nice and big for you to see. So you may say, how can I see anything in that little picture? Click it up and you've got a full screen. And she can go from document to document. So we've got left, we've got right, we've got buffer, well, we got more left and right. And do we have any extras? We have no additional pictures. So Maggie might go back to this coordinator when she sees it and say, I really would like to see a few more pictures. Do you have any more pictures? And maybe there were some, but the coordinator decided not to forward them on to Maggie. So you can see your pictures, and you will then be able to scroll down. And and there's your mileage. If Maggie has done her final review, you are going to see that final review. If she has not completed it, you won't see those last bullets. If Marie, if you do have editing capacity and you put your coordinator comments in, you would see those as well.
I'll be able to do that when I get my username and password.
Yes. Very good. So this is what you, as a coordinator, are going to be able to do. Now, you want to save it. You want a copy of this in your files. You don't want it just living in our database. You want a copy. How are we going to do that? We're going to go to the printer. We're going to go to the printer. And this is a real printer. We don't want a real printer. We want to choose the destination, drop that down, and we want to save it as a PDF. Sometimes it'll say Word to a PDF or print to a PDF, saving it to a PDF. And there's your document. Now you want this in your files. So you're going to save, and we will ultimately cancel, but you'll notice that the name of this file is not the name on that property. It is the generic name of the survey for the year. You will always want to change that name. So Marie may want to put the last name, comma, and maybe she's already got an interpretation and she goes Smith, comma, Smith, John, underscore, C for commendation, or Smith. So you choose your own format for giving it title, but it's something that's going to go in your files and you want to be able to find it when you're looking for it. So you're going to give it a name, and when you do, make sure you say, find your folder, find your folder to put it in, and then give it a new name and save it. And now you've got that on in your computer, in your folder, with its own name, and you can send that back. So we don't want to save. Did you say? Oh, you saved it. Okay. All right. So now to get out of here, we just hit the X. All right. And if she had more folks, now let's go back to filter, if you would. And we can get rid of that filter very quickly. And now we are back, and you can close. And now if you scroll up and down, you can see the whole thing. And you can see all the documents that are in there. So that is basically what you have the ability to do. So again, you scrolled up and down, you saw the document here. I would not advise you to be reviewing your document by scrolling across. Because when you get to the questions, you're not going to see the question. You're going to see 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. But when you look at the paper, you've got the questions. Okay? You should also have your comments are all there, and your recommendations.
Did you already train people how to put the comments in?
When you're doing your app,
As a coordinator on this?
no, that's editing.
Oh, so you don't.
So we're going to hold off on that. If you scroll all the way to the far right, keep going over. There is multiple comments. So for people who want to be able to get into the editing field, there is a section here for the coordinator to fill in some blanks, but it's not necessary. And then Maine Lakes will, I've always kind of hung up on the word recommendation, MLS's recommendation, it's actually MLS's final determination, but so that's in there as well. And to be able to get there is sort of this part 2 of our lecture. And we're not going to go there today because it's already 2:45, and I want to allow people to have some questions. For folks who do feel that they want to be able to edit, I don't know if you want to spend any time on that now, or if you want to do it
Well,
later.
I think that this is a natural break point between experienced people who may want to sit with you and with those few people who had questions about it as newbies who might want to talk to me.
Yes.
And I think what I could do is you go out here, there's seating out here on this level. And did anybody want to talk to me about the program and you're new?
Why don't we,
Or are they all gone? Anybody?
why don't we ask some questions? Let's find out if you have any questions first. And because if you do have people, you can either break to go off with Maggie to talk about the program and what you want. And if we have a few minutes, maybe I can show the few people who did have editing capacity a couple of quick slides to go there. So any questions, please?
Ginger does.
Yeah, so we do things, well, we're new to this, just did last year, but we did things a little bit differently. So we sent people into the field, we got the paper, sometimes they submitted it, but then I was able to go in and review it once it was submitted to MLS.
Yeah.
But basically, I do all the write-ups. So now, once they submit it to MLS, that's it. I can't edit it anymore. I can't add comments.
No, if you want to do that, I guess if they're physically doing the app
Yeah.
on their phone or device, but you would like them not to submit it until you've gone through with them, my only recommendation is you have a meeting with them and say, okay, let's sit down and go through it now. Maybe I have some additional comments that I could put in.
There's no way for them to,
There's no way for them to submit,
yeah.
and then for you to, short of you being an editor, being able to edit, and then you would have that higher level access where you could then go in and,
But I don't think-
which is what Marie was talking about. She goes in and puts coordinator comments and things like that. So I think that's, yes.
Last, I'm coordinator, and I was using this last year, you trained me.
Yeah.
One of the problems that I ran into, and I don't know if this has been resolved or not, but I saw it as a fairly serious issue, is that users of the app could resubmit their survey,
Yes,
and that would actually overwrite anything in the database, any comments that you had added, any comments that I had added.
Well-
It was like starting over again with a whole new row, a whole new record.
all right, I think we're talking possibly two things. Let me just
Okay.
repeat and make sure that we're talking the same. If, as I've done an evaluation, and then I've submitted it, but I meet with my coordinator, and my coordinator says, no, maybe we should have, should we have said
Yeah.
this, should we have said that? On your device, because you're the one who submitted it,
Right?
you can go to save, your saved folder.
Yeah.
And you can, since it's on your device, it
Yeah.
has to be you doing it.
That's right.
You can open it up and it'll say, do you want to edit or copy?
Yeah.
And you say, I want to edit. You bring it up, in between you and your coordinator, you're sitting there and discussing, and you make whatever changes you want. Maybe the person says, well, gee, you gave them a 2 here, but I really think they should have been a 1,
Yeah.
and you can make those changes. And after you make those changes, you send now. And it overwrites what you said before, but it's in your control. It's not somebody else pulling your document because it's only living on your device. Now, okay, so that's you and your coordinator together sitting, reviewing what you did, and maybe making some changes. And you did an edit, and you resubmitted it.
But I'm both a coordinator and an
Yes,
evaluator. So a couple of times I went, well, once, I did it once, and then I said, I shouldn't do that, and I don't want my evaluators to do it either. I did just what you did. I went in, I made some changes, I resaved it, but before I had done that, I had already added some comments in the worksheet, and it overwrote those comments. They were gone. Any comments that you had put in there were gone.
Okay,
It
so-
starts over from 0.
So, yes, so what he is saying is, evaluator sent something in. Coordinator brings it up, has the power to edit and add comments, adds comments. But now comes back to the evaluator and says, gee, we really need to
Yeah.
relook at this. When he pulls it out and edits it and sends it back, right, those comments he made over here are gone because he just overrode it with the new. So
Yeah.
yes, the coordinator would have to go back in and add more comments, but it's still in your own hands.
But the coordinator's never notified when that really happens. But someone could do that, and I don't know that they've done that.
Oh,
And
right.
your comments are gone, my comments are gone, your
Right.
comments are gone.
Ooh,
That's
Becky, think about that.
I mean, it's a toss-up between wanting them to have some control over their data, but not lose what's already been submitted, so it's partly a communication issue. The other option would be to, instead of overwriting, edit and resend, to copy and resend, so then there would be 2 copies that would need to be
Then there would be
Collated.
2 copies.
merged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what I was doing is I would filter out records from my lake,
Yes,
and then download that entire spread piece of worksheet and save it every few days. So if I had to go back,
so did
or if I made a mistake, I could.
Interesting. So, but those are, and he's raising some good questions, and, so you're,
So that is an open question that's kind of serious one for us to
to
figure
think
out.
about how to deal with
Because
that.
that function can be turned off. We can make it so that once it's sent, it's sent. There's no editing from the device end.
Well, but
But-
that eliminates a valuable function too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, it does. So.
It's a balancing act, yeah. You as a coordinator can say to your people, once you have submitted it, and you've told me it's been submitted and I've done my review, you are not to, you know, it's a matter of communicating to them. Once you have notified me that it is in there, do not edit it.
In my case, actually, none of my evaluators will use the app, so I have to pretend I'm them and submit all their stuff anyway, but still.
But you understand, it's a lot of it is knowing who your people are, because when we are entering this data, we don't know, because it's all coming in as a public survey. In other words, I don't know, it's not Barabar Barrett submitting the survey, it's not Marie submitting the survey, it's Joe Public submitting the survey. And then on this end, we are controlling who can see the data, who can print the data, who can get to the data to make changes.
One thing I can do is do a backup every week, twice a week, however often, so that there are backups that if something does get thrown out that shouldn't be, we can go back to it. So,
Is it possible when the survey is submitted to add a macro or something in there which only updates those fields which contain data from the user submitted survey and to leave the fields that are not there untouched?
I don't think so, but I'll look into it and see if there is.
That would be great.
Yeah.
So that would mean you could edit without erasing.
That's a Becky.
Yeah, and I'm not sure.
That she's our
I
expert.
think, Becky, that we have mentioned this person who's sitting in the back of the room to you before as the coordinator of ALEC, who is very computer savvy and might collaborate with us on some of these things. His name is Buddy.
Does anybody else have any questions? Because we are approaching 3 o'clock, so we do want to, I did have one quick point. I think that we just went over it very quickly, and I don't think we quite hit it. When you get to the question about photographs, you're not going to see the option for photographs right away, like you saw when Roy picked it up. There are 2 questions. One says, I am submitting my photographs with the survey. That's the one you want, and that gives you access to your camera and your files to pull your photographs. You are required to put in 4 photographs. The two shore, the 2 buffer are required.
One comment is that when you're doing the survey at the homeowners on your tablet, and you want to do the photos, it's almost, I think, better to do your photos not in the program itself, but to do it on your camera, and then download them to your survey. Choose that as your choice, so that way you have a copy, you still have a copy of your photos.
Yes.
If you do it the other way, just by, which seems really simple, just doing it in the survey, when you send
Oh, it
the
doesn't
survey,
save them to
the
your
photos-
device.
Those photos aren't saved.
Okay. Good point, very good point. Because remember, you had a camera and you had a little file. So what she's saying is take your pictures with your camera to your device, and then when you're in the survey, go to your file folder and go out and pick and choose the picture you want. So you have to have 4. The reason why we did put a option to get around that is just for people who are technically not savvy enough we want them to use the app. Remember, we will only accept them this year on an app, through the app, through the program. So if a
person says, I can't do that, or I can't attach them, but they've taken pictures, they should get those pictures to the coordinator, however they do that. My thought is that if they can attach them to an email, they can attach them to the survey, but it depends upon how they did it. If they did it on a tablet, maybe their pictures are over there in their computer, and so they would send them to the coordinator, and the coordinator in turn would have to send them on to Maggie. So if we open the survey and there's no pictures there, we expect pictures from the coordinator. Okay.
Who here is interested in having an online meeting to discuss what the next part of
Part
this
two.
is? 1, 2, just Marie and Buddy. Okay, you ready that one?
Yeah, we can do that.
Good too.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can email me if you have questions, or call me, and I think I want to meet with these new people here. And it looks as if we might just stay right here because you're done, right, Barbara?
Yes, we are done. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Becky. Thank you.